Hey guys, tonight we're wandering back thousands of years, into the dry, golden hum of ancient Egypt. You can almost feel the heat on your cheeks, see the sun bouncing off polished limestone walls, and smell a vague mix of sandalwood oil and goat. You're not a pharaoh, not a priest, and definitely not a god. You're just someone trying to keep cool, keep clean, and keep your scalp free from sunburn. And that means one thing: you're going to the barber. Not your average strip mall barber, though. This guy probably talks to priests. He might moonlight as a mortician. And yes, he's going to rub your head with onion juice, and you're going to thank him for it. You probably won't survive this, because it's 114 degrees Fahrenheit, and your only shade is your own shadow. But hey, who needs hair when you've got culture? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a bustling avenue in Memphis, capital of ancient Egypt's Old Kingdom. The year is, well, who knows? But the pyramids are still kinda shiny, and bald heads are all the rage. In the heat, everyone's skin glows, sometimes with oil, sometimes with effort. You notice people are oddly hairless. Not just bald, but aggressively smooth. Eyebrows? Barely there. Armpits? Desert dry. Even children have the slick gleam of someone recently scraped with a bronze blade. Hair in ancient Egypt isn't a fashion statement, it's a survival tactic. With lice, gnats, and blazing sun, having hair is practically asking the gods to smite you with forehead blisters and social ostracism. So, barbers are in demand, not just for vanity, but for basic hygiene and cosmic decency. You pass a small, open-air stall shaded by a papyrus mat. The man inside is older, sun-browned, his linen kilt smudged with something that might be oil, or goat butter, or yesterday's onion mask. He gestures you over with the casual authority of someone who's shaved both priests and prisoners. You step in, ducking your head under the fraying mat. No chairs, obviously. You squat on a reed mat while he circles you like a hawk preparing to exfoliate. A jug of cool water waits beside a battered copper bowl. A cloth, damp and mildly herbal, gets draped across your shoulders. His hands smell faintly of frankincense, and something sour. Maybe pickled radish? Maybe regret? Without a word, he pulls out a small bronze razor, curved, honed, and oddly beautiful. Before you can say, "Please don't nick my ear," he tilts your chin and begins. The blade whispers across your scalp with a rhythm that's both soothing and a little too close to brain surgery. And that's when it hits you: barbers here aren't just service workers. They're spiritual custodians. Hair, in Egyptian belief, is a link between the earthly and the divine. Too much of it can block purification rituals, offend certain gods, and make you look like a lazy farmer. So getting shaved? It's practically a blessing. Especially when you're heading into a temple, or a funeral, or even just dinner with your in-laws. Historians still argue whether every Egyptian was expected to be bald at all times, but temples absolutely demanded it. Priests were shaved head to toe every 3 days, sometimes by this very barber. A man whose razor might be the last thing a high priest feels before chanting hymns to Ari. You get the feeling your guy's done this for decades. His hands are steady. He hums a tune you can't place, somewhere between lullaby and lament. A fly buzzes lazily in the heat. You're too relaxed to care. Occasionally, he pauses to dip the blade in water, wipes it on a cloth, then resumes. He flicks a finger at a passing kid, his apprentice, maybe, and grumbles something about running low on lotus wax. The boy scurries off. Your scalp tingles as the last tufts fall. Then comes the oiling. A generous dollop of something nutty is rubbed gently over your bare dome. It smells like almond, clove, and faintly like roasted pigeon. Possibly because everything here smells like roasted pigeon. And there it is, you're officially one of the smooth-headed masses. Ready to be seen by society, the gods, and anyone whose opinion you irrationally value. Back outside, the city hums. Oxen groan under baskets of grain. Women haggle over papyrus rolls. A temple scribe waves at the barber, maybe a regular. You're just another gleaming skull in the crowd now, blending in with the blissfully hairless. You catch your reflection in a polished copper plate. You look cooler, both temperature-wise and socially. There's something ceremonial about being rid of that wild, untamed fluff that once grew on your head. Now you're clean, presentable, respectable. And just as you're about to wander off and sweat in peace, your barber calls out one last thing. He offers to trim your eyebrows for half a fig. How could you say no to that? You lower yourself back onto the reed mat, eyebrows raised, literally, as the barber sharpens a tool with slow, deliberate strokes. This isn't some half-hearted grooming session anymore. You're in the hands of someone who treats every whisker like a spiritual offense. And in ancient Egypt, that's barely an exaggeration. The barber leans in, eyes squinting, and lifts a small obsidian blade, not bronze this time. It gleams like night under the desert sun. You instinctively hold your breath. He steadies your head with one hand and with the other, begins the slow, almost ceremonial removal of your eyebrows. It's oddly comforting, until he mutters something under his breath about preparing you properly, and you realize he might be quoting a funerary chant. You blink. Slowly. Because here's the thing, they weren't just barbers. These guys were often priests. And not the type who just lead prayers. No, these were the backstage passes to the afterlife. The ones who knew which oils kept the gods happy, how many lotus petals went into a purification soak, and yes, how to embalm your corpse so your soul didn't wander the dirt forever in its underwear. You glance sideways at a small shelf near the stall. Jars. Bundles of herbs. A figurine of Thoth, god of wisdom, knowledge, and, curiously, writing. You think, why would a barber need to worship a scribe deity? And then it hits you, knowledge. The barbers were the quiet keepers of sacred routines. Recipes. Rituals. They were trained not just in shaving, but in speaking the right phrases while doing it. Certain chants had to be muttered while cutting near the temples. Some oils were for cleansing the scalp, others protected against evil spirits that, apparently, liked to enter through hair follicles. Historians still argue whether every barber had priestly status or whether only certain barbers, those working in temples or connected to the elite, held dual roles. But archaeological finds show barbers buried with amulets, jars of sacred oils, and sometimes even ceremonial knives. You're now one cucumber slice away from becoming a walking purification spell. The barber finishes your brows and starts mixing a paste in a small dish. It smells earthy, sharp. Myrrh, maybe? You ask what it's for, and he gestures to your neck. Protection, he mumbles. Apparently, neck hair is a spiritual weak point. As he applies the goo, cold and sticky, you feel like a sacred mummy in progress. You remember how Egyptians shaved their bodies before entering temples, especially the high priests of Ra. Being hairless meant being clean. Not just physically, but spiritually. Hair was wild, unpredictable, like chaos incarnate. To step before the gods, you had to strip it all away. But don't get too smug about your new spiritual hygiene. Because barbers back then weren't universally loved. In fact, there was a sort of quiet fear around them. Their tools were sharp. They touched your head, neck, even your inner ears. In a world where curses were real and evil spirits were blamed for everything from boils to bad harvests, letting someone that close to your head was a leap of faith. That's why barbers sometimes carried protective amulets, ink symbols, scarabs, small falcons for Horus. And not just for show. It was said that a cursed client could pass their misfortune on to an unsuspecting barber with a single unblessed shave. So, yeah? Dangerous job, all things considered. But also prestigious. Some barbers were rich. Like own a garden rich. Which in ancient Egypt meant you could afford fresh figs and shade. The most elite barbers catered to nobles and priests, sometimes even royalty. They performed pre-ceremony grooming, post-battle cleanups, and once in a while, they were summoned to shave the dead. Yes. Shaving the dead was a thing. You feel a new level of respect for the man scraping dried herbal goo from your throat. He might be the same person who'll one day trim your nose hairs before you're wrapped in linen and sent off with a jar of lentils and a small figurine of a cat. He wipes your neck clean and dabs your forehead with what feels like rose water. Then, without warning, he spits on a stone and grinds a stick of something dark into it. Coal. You freeze, confused. Relax, he murmurs. Just a little for protection. And before you can object, he gently applies a thin line of eyeliner along your lower lids. You're now bald, moisturized, and fabulous. And don't knock the coal. It wasn't just for fashion. Egyptians believed it warded off the evil eye and reduced glare from the sun. Plus, the lead salts in coal may have had antimicrobial properties. So yes, that guy lining your eyes? He's part priest, part optometrist, part skincare influencer. As you prepare to leave, he presents you with a small reed pouch. Inside, a travel-sized lump of scented wax and a tiny bronze tweezer. You raise a brow, what's left of it, anyway, and he smiles. For when you start growing sins again. You step back into the street, skin tingling, heart weirdly light. Somewhere down the road, a temple drum beats. A woman calls out a prayer to Isis. Children race by, heads shaved with tiny side tufts still intact, offerings to longevity, maybe, or just the last holdouts of childhood innocence. And you? You float through it all like a newly minted amulet. You've been blessed, shaved, anointed, and lined in charcoal. You may not be a god, but you're officially presentable to one. The next morning, your scalp still tingles under the rising sun. It's a soft burn, the kind that says you've been purified, exfoliated, and possibly spiritually dry-cleaned. As you shuffle down to the river to splash your face, you see something you didn't notice yesterday. A line forming near the edge of the marketplace, outside what looks like a slightly fancier barber's stall. There's even a bit of linen draped artfully across the doorway, real fabric, not just faded reeds. You edge closer and notice a sign carved in wood and painted with ochre. It doesn't say barber, because ancient Egyptians didn't really have storefront names like Ra's cuts and curses. But you can tell from the instruments hanging just inside, a set of gleaming bronze razors, an alabaster bowl, and what looks like an incense burner, softly smoking with something piney and sweet. This guy is different. He's younger than your usual barber, dressed in crisp, unwrinkled linen. His hands move quickly but with care, like he's memorized every movement from some ancient manual. But what really gets you is what he's doing before each shave. He's praying. Not a long chant. Just a quick whisper to a tiny icon of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. It's tucked neatly on a corner shelf, half hidden by a bowl of lotus petals. He dips his fingers in oil, touches the icon, and only then begins shaving the client. That's when it sinks in, this isn't just grooming. This is a ritual. Barbers, especially those operating near temples or noble homes, were expected to purify themselves before every service. They'd bathe, light incense, speak protective phrases. All this before lifting a blade. And the blades themselves? Those weren't just sharpened, they were blessed. You watch him carefully run a curved bronze razor over a man's cheek, then clean it with water, dry it on a strip of linen, and finally, wave it through the incense smoke before the next pass. Not for scent, for protection. You step into the stall when your turn comes. There's a slight weight in the air. You almost feel like you're inside a shrine, not a grooming hut. The floor is covered in woven mats. On one side, there's a low platform with a pillow made of stone. Yes, stone. Egyptians thought it helped align your head with the gods. You suspect it just made napping impossible. You sit. He nods at you politely, murmurs a prayer under his breath, and begins to prep his tools. He opens a small case and lays out his razors, 3 of them. One for the scalp, one for facial hair, and one, oddly enough, for ears. You nod, pretending that last one isn't alarming. As he trims your cheeks, he starts talking softly, like he's half in this world and half in another. He tells you the story of how bronze razors were first forged. According to myth, They were a gift from Ta, the creator god, who whispered the secret of alloy into the ears of a metalsmith while he dreamed under a sycamore tree. Historians, of course, don't mention any whispering gods, but they do confirm that bronze tools, including razors, were made as early as 3000 BCE. Razor design evolved over time, from simple crescent-shaped blades to more complex instruments with handles and fine edges. Obsidian and flint were sometimes used too, especially for those who couldn't afford bronze. The man glides the blade under your chin. He moves slowly, not from caution, but from reverence. Every stroke feels like part of a larger script, as if he's not just removing hair but clearing away spiritual clutter. And that incense? Still going. You swear it's working some kind of magic. Either that or you're getting a contact nap. He pauses at your neck, frowns slightly, and pulls out a small pouch. Inside is a powder, ground coriander, he says. Used to prevent irritation. You suspect it also wards off demons, probably the ones responsible for ingrown hairs. Historians still argue whether these purifying gestures were for show or had genuine magical belief behind them. Some say they were simply traditions that evolved into ritual over time. Others point out that everything in Egyptian life, from laundry to funerals, was framed as spiritual. So why not shaving? You try to stay still as he gently powders your jaw, then wipes you clean with a damp cloth. You feel fresh, fragrant, and faintly like a very well-groomed bread roll. The barber wraps up by waving a hand over your head and murmuring a final blessing, not for you, but for himself. Because touching another's face was intimate. And intimacy, in ancient belief, meant spiritual entanglement. That's why the barbers prayed, to cleanse themselves of your spiritual residue. You glance down at the tools again. These aren't just barber's blades. They're tiny, sacred daggers. They've touched priests before purification ceremonies, soldiers before battle, and maybe even a pharaoh preparing to be entombed. And in this moment you can feel it. There's a kind of quiet power in being this still, this clean, this attended to. No mirror, no music, no sales pitch. Just soft incense, whispered prayers, and a blade that's seen more of life and death than you ever will. The barber steps back, gives a short nod, and turns to clean his tools with the same careful reverence he used to handle your chin. You step outside. The sun feels different on your face, sharper, more personal. You're not just shaved. You're shaved. As in, realigned, spiritually vacuumed, possibly more aerodynamic. And as you walk away, a man rushes past you holding a funerary urn and muttering about being late. You catch the word barber in his rant. Someone, somewhere, is getting their final trim. You smooth a hand over your cheek and whisper a quiet thanks, to the blade, to the barber, and to whatever coriander spirit just cleared your pores. By now you're starting to get it. A haircut isn't just a haircut. It's gossip, religion, skincare, and subtle class warfare, all delivered with a very sharp blade and a splash of jasmine oil. So it shouldn't surprise you that when you return to the barber's stall the next day, purely for anthropological observation, of course, you find 3 women already sitting outside, deep in conversation, and not one of them is actually getting shaved. They're here for the talk. The barber is busy snipping the beard of a merchant who's halfway through a dramatic story about his neighbor's donkey wandering into a noblewoman's garden and doing things that can't be repeated near sacred fig trees. Meanwhile, the women are shaking their heads, laughing into their linen wraps, and tossing glances at a passing temple scribe who's pretending not to eavesdrop. You ease yourself onto a nearby mat, and just like that, you're part of the scene. The barber's space is more than a grooming stall. It's a community hub, a public couch, a judgment-free arena where secrets are traded like barley. Barbers weren't just service providers. They were keepers of confessions. If a priest's son had a scandal, the barber probably knew. If someone's cousin fell in love with a Nubian spice seller, the barber probably heard about it before the actual proposal. This guy could start or stop a rumor with just the twitch of a blade. And somehow, it wasn't rude. It was expected. Ancient Egyptian society had a strong oral tradition. News, stories, and personal epics were passed from person to person like bread baskets. The barbershop, with its open air, communal seating, and the sheer length of time required for a good depilation, became the perfect environment for storytelling and information flow. One of the women next to you sighs and says something about her daughter's upcoming marriage. The man beside her grumbles about dowry expectations. You nod solemnly, pretending you know what's appropriate for 3 goats and a small ceramic hippo. And amid this gentle chaos, the barber chimes in, not just to keep the conversation flowing, but to subtly correct someone's misunderstanding of temple ritual. Apparently, the bride's family didn't consult the right priest, and now the wedding might clash with a harvest purification rite. Awkward. Historians still argue whether barbers were considered official sources of community knowledge, or if their social influence was more informal, like ancient neighborhood aunties with blades. But based on the way everyone turns to this man for clarification, it's clear he's more than just a well-oiled wrist. As the bearded merchant finishes his story, now involving a stolen melon and a very angry ibis, the barber leans down and whispers something into his ear. The man bursts into laughter, slaps his thigh, and drops a few extra copper pieces onto the mat. A tip. Not for the trim, but for the punchline. Then there's the goat. You hear it before you see it, a soft, disgruntled bleat. A young boy appears, dragging the reluctant animal by a frayed rope. The barber steps out and pats the goat gently on the head, then says something about the sacred grooming. Wait. Is he shaving the goat? Kind of. Turns out, goats were sometimes groomed before being offered in temple rituals. The cleaner and sleeker the animal, the more pleasing to the gods. You watch, mesmerized, as the barber lightly trims tufts around the goat's ears and brushes its coat with oil-soaked reeds. The goat looks deeply unimpressed, but at least it won't face divine judgment with matted fur. A fringe practice? Sure. But not uncommon. Barbers who worked near temples were sometimes tasked with prepping both people and animals for ceremonies. Some even claimed to know the secret herbs that calmed a nervous beast before sacrifice. Ethical? Debatable. Quirky? Absolutely. Meanwhile, a priest enters the circle, tall, bald, draped in pristine linen, and looking like he just finished a meditation marathon. Everyone hushes a bit. He nods to the barber, who immediately begins preparing a fresh blade in a specific oil mix, olive, frankincense, and something pungent you can't place. You realize this is a pre-ritual trim. The priest is heading to a lunar offering tonight, and he needs to be spiritually spotless. The barber doesn't just shave him, he sings while doing it. Soft, rhythmic phrases, likely an invocation to keep the priest's connection to the divine uninterrupted by stray stubble. The women start whispering again, not gossip this time, but curiosity. One says she heard the last priest went bald too early, and now his dreams are filled with beetles. Another says that's just a story meant to scare kids into bathing more often. You glance down at your hands, still faintly scented from yesterday's coriander rub. You're starting to understand. The grooming, the rituals, the jokes, the whispers, it's all part of a rhythm, a quiet hum that pulses beneath the grand monuments and golden sarcophagi. Not everyone gets to build pyramids. But everyone gets hair. And everyone, eventually, has to decide what to do with it. The sun dips lower. A few clients have trickled in, one with dusty feet and a chipped tooth, another clearly from a wealthier home judging by the embroidered sandals. The barber greets them both the same, with a nod, a fresh cloth, and a small brass bowl for spitting. Because even in this sacred art, practical hygiene matters. And just as you're about to head out, the barber's apprentice points to a young man lingering on the edge of the stall. Nervous, twitchy, glancing side to side like a cat that's never been hugged. You lean a little closer. Turns out, he's come for a secret trim. He's growing his beard against his family's wishes and needs help making it look deliberate. The barber smirks, pulls out a very thin blade, and says nothing. No judgment. Just precision. Because sometimes being a barber means knowing when to talk, and when to keep your mouth as shut as a tomb. The temple bells chime softly as the sun dips below the rooftops of Memphis, casting long shadows across the plaza. There's a hush in the air, like even the wind is walking on tiptoe. You follow a quiet trail of mourners through a narrow street scented with frankincense and baked brick, drawn by the low murmur of a funeral procession. You weren't invited, but then again, no one really checks guest lists at a burial. What catches your eye isn't the casket or the elaborate cart carrying offerings, it's the barber. He's there, in full ritual dress. White linen, shaved head, eyes rimmed in ceremonial kohl. Not a speck of stubble anywhere. He moves with slow, deliberate steps, holding a bronze razor wrapped in palm leaves as though it's a sacred relic. Which, for this ceremony, it is. This is no ordinary trim. As the body is laid out, you watch the barber begin his task. He steps forward like a priest about to enter a shrine. Everyone else backs away, leaving him space. The razor glints in the dying light as he kneels and begins shaving the dead man's scalp. You're not sure what surprises you more, that it's happening in front of everyone, or that no one seems surprised at all. In ancient Egypt, the afterlife was no casual affair. You didn't just die and show up at the gates of eternity with bed hair and untrimmed nostrils. That would be like showing up to a job interview in stained pajamas. Unacceptable. So, bodies were cleansed, perfumed, anointed, and yes, shaved. Historians still argue whether this was a symbolic act for all the dead or reserved for elite classes and priests. Some believe it was a final purification, part of a broader belief that the soul needed to be cleansed of earthly attachments. Hair, after all, grows in the messiest parts of the body. It traps sweat, dust, and the lingering scent of yesterday's goat stew. You edge a little closer. The barber murmurs something under his breath as he works. Not loud enough to be heard, but you sense the rhythm. A chant? A prayer? Maybe just something to keep his hands steady. One of the mourners, the deceased's brother, maybe, offers a small alabaster jar. The barber dips his fingers in, then massages the substance across the dead man's scalp. It's thick and golden, probably a blend of castor oil and cedar. A preservation balm, yes, but also something of a spiritual send-off. The scent rises, woody and sweet. He moves next to the face, trimming the beard with short, practiced motions. He even clips the nose hairs with a delicate pair of bronze tweezers. You're impressed, not just by the steadiness of the hand, but by the solemnity of the act. There's no rush. No distraction. Just an intense focus on sending this man into the next world in the most dignified state possible. A few children peek around the edge of the gathering. One whispers, "Why do they shave the dead?" A woman hushes him and answers softly, "So the gods can see their true face." You pause. That might be the most beautiful explanation you've heard all day. The idea was that in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, you were judged not just by your heart, but by your presentation. You stood before Osiris, god of the dead, and your soul was weighed. But appearance mattered too. Cleanliness wasn't vanity, it was moral hygiene. And in the quiet work of the barber, there's an almost divine empathy. He's the last person to touch the dead. The final hands to cleanse them before eternity. It's no wonder some barbers were believed to possess protective spells and incantations. Some may have even studied alongside priests to learn the right phrases to whisper as they shaved someone's final beard. Quirky fact? Some families would save clippings from the final shave and place them in small linen pouches buried with the body. A kind of spiritual ID tag. This was my face. This is who I was. As the ceremony wraps up, the barber steps back. His tools are placed in a bowl of perfumed water. Not just to clean them, but to ritually neutralize any spiritual residue. The crowd begins to disperse. No dramatic sobbing, no wailing. Just the quiet gravity of people who believe they'll see this man again, possibly in a boat, on a river of stars. You hang back a moment, watching the barber rinse his hands in a small stone basin. His apprentice collects the tools with careful fingers. One blade gets wrapped in linen and set aside. Maybe that one is never used again. Maybe, once it's touched the afterlife, it becomes sacred beyond reuse. You turn to leave and nearly bump into a market woman holding a pot of hot stew. She frowns at your proximity to the ceremony and mutters something about hair and lingering spirits. You realize she's right to be wary. There's a kind of energy hanging in the air, like sandalwood and mystery. But you also feel peaceful. There's something gentle in knowing that even death involves grooming. That someone's final moments in the physical world are touched not just by grief, but by care. By someone who knows how to ease not just tension in muscles, but tension in memory. As you walk back toward the city lights, your skin still smells faintly of cedar and rose water from your last visit to the barber. You think of the ritual, the soft hum of a chant, the warmth of oil on a cold forehead. And you wonder, when your time comes, will someone do the same for you? Hopefully with fewer leeches. You wake the next morning to the faint scent of bread baking and something slightly less appetizing, onion. Not breakfast onion, not grilled or sweet. Medicinal onion. The kind that makes your eyes water before it even hits your skin. Turns out, today's the day you learn about barber-grade concoctions, the oils, tonics, balms, and bizarre goops that made ancient Egyptian grooming part beauty regimen, part magical protection, and part smell endurance test. You return to your now favorite stall, and the barber greets you with a nod and a small clay bowl filled with what looks like whipped mud. It jiggles slightly. You try not to make eye contact. Scalp potion, he says, dipping 2 fingers in. Good for heat rash. Also possibly divinely inspired. He applies it to your freshly shaved head with an enthusiasm usually reserved for bricklaying. It's cool and weirdly gritty, like a smoothie gone horribly wrong. The barber begins listing ingredients: olive oil, powdered lotus root, crushed garlic, fermented onion, and just a touch of donkey fat. You blink. Donkey fat? He grins. Smoothest finish in Memphis. Historians confirm that the Egyptians used a vast array of ingredients in their grooming routines, many of them surprisingly sophisticated. Oils from almonds, castor beans, and morina were standard. Honey was mixed into scalp treatments not just for scent, but for its antimicrobial properties. And yes, onion juice was thought to stimulate hair regrowth. Some of these recipes were passed down in scrolls. Others were family secrets, whispered like treasure maps. Barbers were equal parts chemists and therapists, massaging healing potions into their clients while listening to complaints about joint pain, mother-in-laws, and existential crises caused by uneven eyebrow lines. The paste on your head starts to tingle. Not the relaxing kind, more the "is this fire?" kind. The barber pats your cheek and tells you it's working. You choose to believe him, mostly because washing it off would involve losing all social credibility. Next, he reaches for a tall, thin jar filled with amber-colored oil. He rolls it between his palms, warming it with practiced ease, then dribbles a few drops across your shoulders and neck. This one smells amazing. Like nutmeg and temple incense. He calls it Ra's touch. It's said that pharaohs used similar oils before religious festivals. Some formulas were reserved for the elite, others mimicked royal recipes for the ambitious middle class. Ancient advertisements? Kind of. One fragment of papyrus even lists oil of Horus's breath as a scalp treatment. No one knows exactly what that was, but judging by your current experience, it probably didn't smell like victory. As the barber kneads the oil into your shoulders, you start to relax. Really relax? Your limbs go soft, your thoughts start drifting, and you wonder briefly if ancient Egyptian massage therapy is the real lost art here. Suddenly, he snaps his fingers, points to your chest, and says, "Hair there too. Need balance." You look down. He's not wrong. Your face is a temple and your chest is currently a wilderness. He pulls out a piece of linen soaked in something sticky, possibly beeswax, possibly nightmare fuel. Before you can object, he slaps it onto your sternum and yanks. You don't scream out loud. Hair removal was no joke in ancient Egypt. Depilation was a full-body sport. Men and women alike plucked, shaved, scrubbed, and waxed, sometimes even with pumice stones. Wealthier citizens had servants to assist. Poorer ones made do with homemade pastes and prayer. Smoothness meant cleanliness, and cleanliness meant favor with the gods. Or at least fewer fleas. Historians still argue whether full-body depilation was expected of everyone, or mostly reserved for upper classes and religious roles. But archaeological remains show that even simple burial sites often contain razors and grooming tools, suggesting hair removal was a widespread obsession. The barber lets you catch your breath while he starts preparing something new. It's green, frothy, smells faintly of cucumber and something sinister. Anti-sweat formula, he says. Good for underarms. Also wards off crocodiles. You raise an eyebrow. He doesn't blink. Some fringe historians believe that crocodile dung was once used in certain skin treatments, either as a binding agent or, more likely, to repel insects and curses. Whether or not that's true, you silently vow to never question a man with a razor and a bucket of mystery paste. He smooths the green gel under your arms, humming something tuneless and vaguely threatening. It's cold. You yelp. The apprentice snickers. Then comes the incense. Final step. A small clay dish of hot coals is placed beneath a basket. You're invited to sit over it for a few moments while scented smoke wafts upward. Yes. You are, in effect, being spiritually steamed. You don't even resist anymore. You just close your eyes, breathe in the scent of cinnamon and sandalwood, and try not to think about the goat who bleated in this exact spot yesterday. The ritual ends with a pat on the back and a smudge of ochre on your forehead, a good luck charm. The barber nods approvingly. You're clean now, he says. Inside and out. You step into the sun, skin slick, pores wide open, smelling like a holy bakery. Passers-by sniff the air as you walk by. One woman raises an eyebrow and murmurs, "Fancy oils today." You beam. Because yes, it hurt. And yes, you may have temporarily lost your dignity with that linen strip. But you're glowing. Spiritually and literally. And as you pass another stall, this one offering clay amulets and pickled fish, you overhear a young man asking where he can find the barber with the onion potion. You smile to yourself. You're a walking ad. By midday, the sun is a smug coin perched high in the sky, and the plaza begins to sizzle. You duck into the shade of a vendor's canopy, the scent of crushed mint and dates drifting from a nearby food stall, and spot something strange. Two men arguing, not fighting, just debating passionately with their hands. And at the center of it? A barber. You ease closer, drawn in like a cat toward drama. Turns out, the conflict isn't about politics or property. It's about haircuts. One man, a stout farmer with dust-stained feet and sun-wrinkled cheeks, wants the temple-style beard trim, tight, symmetrical, sacred geometry kind of stuff. The other man, taller, dressed in finer linen, and probably a junior priest based on the eyeliner and attitude, scoffs. "That's for initiates," he says. "You'll look ridiculous with the cheek triangles." The barber, wisely silent, just waits with his hands resting lightly on the linen cloth laid over his knee, a neutral observer in the battlefield of aesthetic aspiration. You're beginning to realize something important. Not all barbers are created equal. And neither are the clients. In ancient Egypt, where everything from your sandals to your coffin was a status symbol, hair was another badge of identity. And the people who cut it? Gatekeepers to those identities. Some barbers worked in open-air markets, affordable, busy, maybe a little noisy. They saw fishermen, farmers, children with lice, and uncles who hadn't exfoliated since the last flood season. Others? They were high-tier artisans, grooming the faces of temple functionaries, scribes, and those who could recite at least 3 different hymns to Thoth before breakfast. And the difference wasn't just the price, it was the technique, the oils used, the entire experience. Historians still argue whether there was a formal ranking system among barbers or if the lines were more socially constructed. But surviving art and texts hint at grooming guilds, or at the very least, strong client loyalties. One poem even implies that to change one's barber is to betray the gods. Dramatic? Yes. But hair loyalty is eternal. The farmer eventually wins the debate, plops down, and demands the temple trim. The priest sniffs and walks off, muttering about amateurs. The barber chuckles to himself and begins. As you watch him work, you realize just how subtle the hierarchies are. The priest's beard had been styled upward, a mark of reverence and alignment with the heavens. The farmer wants the downward pointed triangle style, favored by temple guards and junior acolytes. It's a little edgy, a little ambitious. Then there's the matter of sideburns. Yes, sideburns were a thing. Certain cuts flared them out like sunrays, great if you wanted to invoke Ra, terrible if your ears stuck out. Others were shaved high for a more divine egg look. Some men even plucked theirs entirely and substituted them with painted lines. Because nothing says commitment to fashion like replacing your hair with art. You glance across the square and spot another barber working on a child, maybe 6 or 7, shaving the boy's head clean except for a single braided lock left dangling behind the ear. It twitches in the breeze like a cat's tail. The side lock of youth. A powerful symbol. It marked the boy as still under divine protection, too young for temple service but old enough to begin learning rituals. When it was cut, it marked the child's passage into a new spiritual role, or sometimes just puberty. It's both adorable and heavy with symbolism. You asked your barber, yes, your barber, because let's face it, you're loyal now, how someone earns a fancy beard design. He raises an eyebrow and says, "First, be born with the right father. Second, try not to anger any gods. Third, bring better figs." So, not entirely merit-based. Barbers in higher circles operated under different conditions. Some worked indoors, in shaded courtyards or beside private pools. They had apprentices, better tools, access to imported oils, and, importantly, clients who tipped in silver. These barbers kept detailed grooming records, some even carved into ostraca, broken pottery shards. What angle of cheek line a noble preferred. Which coal blend worked best for someone's night vision. Even whether their client preferred their post-shave towel mildly steamed. And there was barber snobbery, too. You overhear one young noble snort. "Oh, he still uses bronze blades? How quaint." Another brags that his barber only uses obsidian imported from the eastern deserts, twice as sharp, 3 times as sacred. It's easy to laugh at, until you realize they're serious. There's also social tension when someone from a lower class tries to emulate upper-class styles. A fisherman shows up with a priest's cheek design and suddenly the fish market's whispering. Who does he think he is? Ra's chosen? This grooming gatekeeping isn't new. You've seen it before. In middle school. On Instagram. In the mirror when you gave yourself bangs. And of course, there were the royal barbers. The elite of the elite. Only a handful served in the court. They had robes, titles, probably a full skincare range blessed by temple cats. These were the artists who styled pharaohs, prepared queens for public appearances, and maybe, just maybe, handled the final grooming before someone was mummified. One name even survives, Kacker. He was the overseer of the barbers of the palace. And you bet he had opinions about sideburns. You glance back to your stall, where the farmer is now admiring his sharp cheek angles in a polished bronze mirror. He tosses the barber a small bundle of dried dates and ambles off, head held high. Probably hoping someone mistakes him for temple staff. You catch your own reflection again, clean scalp, softened features, that lingering scent of clove oil. You're still an outsider here, but you're starting to read the codes. Who gets what trim, which oil means what, who tips in copper and who tips in gossip. And it's kind of beautiful. Because in this world of sand and stone and sweat, a haircut is more than grooming. It's identity. Aspiration. Maybe even a form of prayer. And if you want the elite cut next time, bring better figs. You rise early the next day, drawn by the clatter of pottery and the far-off bleating of goats. But today, you're not just a passive observer of grooming greatness, you're shadowing a master. His name is Kapa. Not the fanciest barber in Memphis, but definitely the busiest. He's got the stamina of a desert fox and the hands of a linen weaver, and today, you're his very confused apprentice. Your training begins before dawn, naturally. Because clients don't wait, and the Nile's heat is a lot less aggressive at sunrise. You meet him outside his modest mud brick home, and he's already fully alert, sharpening a razor with the same focus some people reserve for religious carvings. He nods at you like you're a donkey that may or may not be useful. You follow him to his stall, a woven canopy stretched between two palm trees near a baker's oven. It smells like charred barley and sweat, surprisingly invigorating. First task? Fetch the water. The Nile's edge is a bit of a walk, and as you trudge down with two unbalanced clay jugs, you try not to drop them into the crocodile-scented current. This early in the day, even the river seems sleepy. You fill the jugs, return, and realize Kapa hasn't moved. He's meditating. Or possibly napping upright. Hard to tell. Eventually, the day begins. First client, a young soldier who demands a full scalp shave and no funny business with the eyebrows. Kapa doesn't blink. He pats the soldier's shoulder, plunks him down, and begins, fast and practiced. You're in charge of water refills and insect fanning. The flies here are ambitious. One nearly carries off your rag. The soldier grunts something about heading to the desert border. Kapa nods, snipping carefully behind his ears. He replies with a few jokes about desert hair growing back too proud. You don't get it. The soldier laughs anyway. Maybe it's a military thing. You hand Kapa a clean linen strip as he finishes. He wipes the soldier's head like it's a sacred relic, then hands him a lump of scented resin. For luck and protection, he says. The soldier nods, flips a copper diban onto the mat, and walks off, shiny-headed and ready to stab things in the name of Pharaoh. Client 2, a woman in tears. Not over the cut, she hasn't even sat down yet. She's holding a crumpled reed note, and muttering something about her husband, a missing mule, and a dream involving the god Anubis and a very aggressive cat. Kapa listens. Really listens. Then he places a soft cloth across her lap, gently oils her hands with a balm that smells like thyme and fig, and begins plucking her chin hairs. No razors. Just careful tweezing, one hair at a time. You wince in sympathy, but she doesn't even flinch. By the time he's done, her breathing's slowed, the tears are dry, and she's smiling. Barbers weren't just for hair, they were therapists, dream interpreters, even low-key matchmakers. Kapa explains that certain dreams, especially ones involving animals, require spiritual cleansing through grooming. It's not superstition, he insists. It's balance. Historians still argue whether this blend of grooming and therapy was officially endorsed by temples or just organically evolved over generations. But the line between ritual and routine in Egypt was always blurred. Hair removal wasn't just practical, it was an act of spiritual maintenance. You're starting to understand. Mid-morning arrives with a dust cloud and a very sweaty nobleman. This one's clearly used to different treatment. He wrinkles his nose at the setup. Where's your awning? It's hot, Kapa. Kapa doesn't argue. He simply gestures for you to adjust the reed screen, throws a fresh linen over the mat, and starts preparing a deluxe oil blend. Nut oil, almond extract, touch of myrrh. He whispers to you, like passing down a family secret. He lets the mixture warm in a shallow bowl on a sun-heated brick, then begins applying it to the nobleman's neck in slow, precise strokes. The man's head lolls like a sleepy hippo. During the trim, the noble complains about temple taxes, his daughter's new crush on a chariot driver, and a suspicious mole. Kapa listens, responds only when needed, and never breaks pace. At one point he stops, pinches the nobleman's cheek, and says, "This mole's older than your sandals. Stop worrying." The man laughs and drops 2 silver rings into the payment jar. Kapa doesn't flinch. You, on the other hand, are sweating so hard your eyebrows are slipping. But there's no time to rest. Next up? A woman with 5 children, each with a different disaster on their head. Lice, scalp rash, one half-shaved tuft from a sibling prank. You assist while Kapa makes a paste from clay, vinegar, and crushed juniper. He applies it like a painter touching up a crumbling fresco. The children scream. The mother looks thankful. One of the kids tries to bite you. At some point, a pigeon flies directly into the stall, slams into your water jar, and flaps around like it owns the place. Kapa calmly waves it out with a shaving cloth and says, That's the third this week. You start to wonder if the birds are a sign. Late afternoon now. Your feet are coated in dust and oil. Kepa's still at it, this time, giving a young man his first beard shaping. The client is nervous, trembling slightly, asking 100 questions. Will it itch? Will the girls notice? What if it grows back wrong? Kepa tells him. Every beard has a soul. You're just helping it find its shape. You nearly cry. From exhaustion. But also from the weird beauty of it. Finally, the sun begins its descent. Kepa rinses his tools in a mix of vinegar and lotus water, dries them in the shade, and kneels beside the mat. You think he's praying. Then he pats the ground beside him. You sit. He dips his fingers into a small jar, honey, rosemary, and something bitter, and rubs it into your temples. Good work, he says softly. You didn't faint or drop the razors. You're beaming. Until he adds, almost didn't faint. And as the last rays of sunlight stretch across Memphis, you realize you've learned something real. Not just how to wipe sweat or mix oils or dodge furious pigeons, but how a man with a razor can offer peace, identity, and comfort in a world ruled by sand, stone, and stars. You lie back on the mat, the scent of myrrh clinging to your skin, and wonder if tomorrow's first task will involve more goats, or just a really dramatic eyebrow emergency. Either way, you'll be ready. The next morning, your shoulders ache in the kind of way that says you did actual work yesterday, but your scalp? Silky smooth. The oils Kepa rubbed into your skin have done their job. You catch your reflection in a puddle and yep, you still look freshly reborn. You've earned your glow. But today isn't about barbers. It's about the people they serve. Specifically, the ones who wield hair as status, or the lack of it, as both fashion statement and subtle power play. You start noticing it everywhere. Hairstyles, or non-hairstyles, carry meaning. And you can't unsee it. That priest passing by? Completely bald, of course, with a kohl line so crisp it could slice onions. He walks like he's spiritually superior to the air. That merchant woman? Her head is clean-shaven except for a perfectly braided plait behind her right ear, adorned with a tiny lapis bead. Then there's the kid who just ran past, bare scalp, save for a decorative side tuft flopping in the breeze like a divine antenna. And then there's the nobleman. You see him from a distance first, gold-threaded linen, a polished bronze mirror in one hand, and wait. Hair? Actual hair? You squint. Yes. A shoulder-length wig of thick, dark plaits. Carefully styled. Lightly dusted with crushed blue lotus petals. No way that's natural. The guy's as bald as everyone else under there, guaranteed. And here's the twist, he wants you to know that. Because in ancient Egypt, fake hair was real power. Wigs weren't just aesthetic, they were high fashion, ceremonial armor, and sometimes literal status beacons. Wigs meant wealth. Wigs meant you had servants to shave you clean, perfumers to scent your scalp, and a special chest to store your headwear. Some people even had a day wig and a party wig. No, really. You follow him discreetly. Not stalking, just historical tailing. You notice how other people treat him, heads lowered, respectful distance. His wig has weight. Socially and possibly physically. It's heavy with beeswax, likely laced with frankincense oil and scented resins. Every swish is a silent brag. Historians have recovered wigs made from human hair, sheep's wool, and palm fibers. The best ones? A blend of real hair and date palm fiber, layered for volume and sewn into an intricate lattice. Some even came with little gold ornaments clipped into the braids. Essentially, ancient glam squads existed. And of course, some noblemen did the opposite. You stop by a vendor stall selling combs carved from ivory and obsidian and hear a customer say something wild. The new thing is voluntary baldness. No oils, no shine. Just raw scalp. Very modern. What? Apparently it's the latest trend among nobles trying to stand out. After generations of shaved, oiled, ornamented scalps, the raw look has emerged. A kind of rebellious minimalism. No scent. No sheen. just honest skin. It's giving ancient Egyptian grunge aesthetic. You begin to realize how many social signals are tied to grooming. Not just what you wear, but what you choose not to. Wealthier Egyptians could afford to depilate constantly, reapply oils, and visit elite barbers like Kepa's cousin, who supposedly refuses to speak unless addressed with 3 titles. But for poorer folks, hair removal was aspirational. That fisherman over there? He's got patchy stubble and a sunburned scalp. Not because he doesn't want to be smooth, but because time and money don't permit it. 1 copper coin for a shave means 1 less for bread. So, he grooms once a week, if he's lucky, and tries to scrub away the rest with sand. You catch him rubbing his head with a rough cloth dipped in vinegar. DIY depilation. It stings. His wince tells you so. And lice? Lice are everywhere. Even the elite get them, though they have the good manners to pretend otherwise. The peasants know better. They scratch, pick, and sometimes even sing little rhymes about the bugs as they try to flick them off one another. 1 kid holds up a squirming louse like a trophy and yells, "Biggest one yet!" His friend tries to top him. It's both horrifying and weirdly charming. Barbers offered some relief. For those who could afford it, regular shaves kept lice away. But for others, it was a war fought with vinegar-soaked cloths, sand scrubs, and hopeful prayers to whichever god handled scalp infestations. 1 quirky method you hear about today? Wrapping your head in softened fig leaves overnight. Supposedly smothers lice. More likely, it just makes you sticky and confused. Historians still debate whether these folk remedies were effective or just desperate measures. But they show how much people cared about their hair, or lack thereof. Whether it was a polished temple baldness, an ambitious nobleman's wig, or a humble fisherman's twice-a-week vinegar wash, each told a story. And for some, the story was rebellion. You meet a man on the edge of the market, lounging like he has absolutely no regard for social rules. He's got short stubble, not quite a beard, not quite a statement, and a dusting of ash along his jawline. It's an unspoken middle finger to the priestly smoothness of the elite. "They say I look like Set," he says, smirking. "Let them say it." Set, the god of chaos, was often depicted with wild, animalistic features. Some people avoided his vibe like the plague. Others leaned right into it. Especially those sick of the perfect, polished look that screamed conformity. This man doesn't want balance or oil or spiritual alignment. He wants edge. Rugged, confrontational grooming. And honestly, it kind of works for him. You leave the market with your head buzzing. Not from heat, but from the realization that hair wasn't just about cleanliness. It was a social code. A style language. A way to move through the world and say, "This is who I am." Or who I want you to think I am. Whether you're flaunting a wig that costs more than a goat, or scraping off lice with salt and faith, every scalp tells a story. And yours? Right now it says, "I'm learning." You're sitting on a mat again, lazily fanning yourself with a palm leaf and pretending not to listen to the escalating argument happening 3 stalls over. But it's hard to ignore, it's loud, dramatic, and involves a man clutching his face like it just betrayed him. "He ruined me!" the man shouts, pointing an accusatory finger at a panicked-looking barber. "I asked for sacred cheek lines, and he gave me goat boy geometry." You wince on instinct. Not because you can see the damage, but because you know, a bad haircut in ancient Egypt was more than just embarrassing. It was dangerously symbolic. The man's beard is indeed unfortunate. It zigzags in a way that suggests either artistic daring or intense emotional distress. Possibly both. The symmetry is off. The cheek angle is too sharp. And worst of all, his jawline now looks faintly accusatory, like it's permanently judging the gods. You can almost feel the priesthood's collective side-eye. Kepa wanders over, peeks once, and says under his breath, "That's not just bad, that's ritually unsettling." Apparently, a crooked cut could be more than a cosmetic failure. It could be a spiritual problem. You've learned by now that Egyptians didn't just value grooming, they ritualized it. The lines of a beard could reflect alignment with Ma'at, the principle of truth and order. Mess up that balance? You might as well offer the gods a lopsided obelisk. Not a good look. Historians still argue whether facial hair shapes were formally regulated within temple hierarchies or if the social pressure simply acted like law. But records show very specific expectations: straight cheek lines, smooth transitions, and geometric precision. Anything else could be interpreted as disrespect, or worse, chaos. Chaos, as in set-level chaos. And here's the real kicker: barbers were held responsible. A crooked trim could get you blacklisted, mocked, or spiritually cursed, depending on who you offended. Especially among temple personnel or nobility, where appearance was theology. A poor shave might be interpreted as an omen, or, in the case of one particular nobleman's funeral from recorded history, an intentional insult from a rival house. Cue scandal. Cue curses. The man with the zigzag beard isn't taking chances. He marches straight to a nearby priest and demands an aesthetic cleansing. You follow at a distance, watching the priest nod solemnly and bring out a small dish of natron salts and oil. The man kneels. A short prayer is chanted. His cheeks are wiped. There's no fixing the beard now, but apparently you can neutralize the cosmic side effects. K-Pa leans over and whispers, "They'll need to grow that back in penance." That's right. Beard recovery as spiritual redemption. You can't help but wonder, was there a golden age of haircut disasters in Egypt? Did one bad trim ever cause a temple riot? Possibly. There's an old fringe tale K-Pa shares about a royal groom who received an uneven sideburn right before his wedding to a high priestess. The ceremony was paused for a full hour while the court debated whether he could be photographed, or sculpted, like that. In the end, they shaved him entirely and slapped on a ceremonial beard prosthetic. Crisis averted. You're starting to see how grooming failures were treated with dramatic reverence. Not just because people were vain, but because grooming was part of spiritual performance. You were constantly presenting yourself to the gods, and the gods, notoriously, were very judgy. You glance at your own reflection in a bronze dish, feeling grateful that K-Pa is your go-to now. Your cheek line could pass temple inspection. Your scalp gleams like a sun-blessed papyrus scroll. You're in the clear, for now. Still, curiosity gets the better of you. You ask K-Pa what happens to barbers who mess up regularly. He raises a single eyebrow and says, "They start grooming goats." Apparently, exile to livestock detail was the ancient equivalent of a demotion. Goats are less picky, though they do kick. The apprentice adds that some barbers in the countryside took shortcuts, dull blades, sloppy oil blends, even skipping the purification rites. Their clients? Often unaware, until they walked into temple grounds and were promptly escorted out for facial chaos. That's the polite term. One odd custom K-Pa tells you about. In some circles, a bad haircut was corrected by applying thick black coal lines along the jaw and cheeks, faking clean lines. It was sort of a cosmetic bandage, a temporary fix until the hair grew back. Not unlike penciling in your eyebrows after an overzealous wax. We've all been there. You watch as a young man approaches K-Pa's stall, face flushed with panic. His beard is salvageable, but the corners are uneven and the mustache is doing something unspeakable. "Fix me," he whispers, desperation clinging to him like sweat. K-Pa doesn't hesitate. He sits the man down, rinses his face with perfumed water, and begins the correction process. No shame, no judgment, just careful, compassionate repair. The apprentice mixes a little lotus oil and honey, part balm, part apology. Within minutes, the mustache is tamed, the cheeks are smoothed, and dignity is quietly restored. The man leaves with his head high and a fresh dab of ochre on his chin for luck. You watch him go, marveling at how a single line of hair, or its absence, can carry so much meaning. You ask K-Pa if he's ever made a mistake. He pauses. "Once. Long ago. Gave a merchant's son a widow's peak by accident." Kid cried. "His father said I cursed the family with early baldness." You blink. "What happened?" K-Pa shrugs. "I gave them free goat shaves for a month." seemed fair. You laugh, but the story sticks with you. Because behind every straight line is a steady hand. And behind that? 1,000 years of belief that every trim is a reflection of order. Of Ma'at. Of your place in the cosmos. A bad haircut isn't just awkward. It's cosmic misalignment. And the worst part? It grows back slower when the gods are disappointed. Late afternoon sun glints across the plaza, throwing golden halos on anything vaguely polished, copper bowls, bald heads, and the occasional curious cat. You're following Kepa again, this time not to observe his grooming rituals, but to ogle his gear. Because if you've learned anything by now, it's this: barbers were tool snobs. You arrive at his home, a modest structure of sun-dried mud brick, with reed mats hanging across the doorway and a faint smell of chamomile drifting from somewhere unseen. Inside, the cool darkness is a relief. The air feels dense with herbal oil and secrets. He leads you to a wooden box, unassuming, worn from decades of handling. Then, slowly, like unveiling a sacred relic, he opens it. Inside? A barber's toolkit that would make any temple craftsman weep with envy. First, the razors. 3 of them, laid in a linen-lined tray, one small and curved like a crescent moon, another flat and square-edged, and a third, black and glassy, unmistakably obsidian. Kepa lifts it gently, its surface gleaming like frozen smoke. Obsidian sharp enough to shave the gods, he murmurs. Obsidian blades, imported from the eastern deserts or beyond, were prized for their incredible sharpness. Though brittle, they gave a smoother cut than bronze and didn't nick the skin as easily. Expensive? Yes. Overkill? Maybe. But if your client's a priest, a noble, or someone extremely twitchy about chin symmetry, it's worth it. Next, he unwraps his ivory combs. Carved from hippo tusk, they're etched with tiny hieroglyphs, mostly blessings, though one seems to say, "Don't sneeze while shaving." Noted. Historians confirm that combs weren't just for detangling, many were ceremonial. Their inscriptions suggest protective purposes, or perhaps just barber flair. Kepa's combs are double-sided, fine teeth for scalp, coarse for beards. He says one belonged to his grandfather, passed down like a family sword, but pointier. Then come the tweezers. 3 pairs, each smaller than the last. Made from bronze, their tips are so precise they look capable of plucking shame from your very soul. One pair is engraved with a tiny falcon, Horus's mark. Another, curiously, has the symbol for Hathor, goddess of beauty. You raise an eyebrow. Why Hathor? He shrugs. Sometimes a well-groomed man gets more offerings. You can't argue with that. He brings out a small pumice stone, smooth and worn from use. For elbows, heels, sometimes eyebrows if they've gone rogue, he says, handing it to you. It's heavier than it looks, and faintly smells of lemon and salt. Quirky fact? Some barbers believe that exfoliation opens spiritual pores, making a person more receptive to divine messages. A little rough on the skin, but hey, you might catch a vision while scrubbing. Then there are the oil jars. Tiny alabaster vessels, each with a tightly sealed cap. Kepa opens one, and a thick scent of jasmine and cinnamon swirls out. Another smells like sharp vinegar and something fishy? For scalp infections, he explains, very seriously. You try not to flinch. Each jar is labeled with ink symbols. One reads, "Protection." Another says, "For sleep." One just says, "Strength," which feels like either a baldness remedy or something for armpits. You don't ask. Historians still debate whether these labels were medical, magical, or both. But Kepa insists the one marked "protection" kept a jealous husband from sprouting forehead boils. That's a testimonial, right? He points to a final item, a shaving cloth, dyed dark red and embroidered with a line from the Book of the Dead. "Let the blade carry no malice." It reads. It's used only for temple clients. You're touched. Not just by the craftsmanship, but by the reverence. These aren't just grooming supplies. They're tools of ritual. Every blade, every comb, every drop of oil has a purpose that extends beyond hair and into the realm of identity, spirituality, and sometimes, very stylish gossip. You help him pack the box again, gently folding each cloth, clicking lids closed, aligning the blades just so. K-Pa watches, nods, then says, "You want to carry it tomorrow?" Your eyes widen. Carrying a barber's box isn't just a task. It's a statement. A sign of trust. Apprentices only reach that point after weeks, sometimes years. You try to act casual and just mutter, "Sure." He smirks like he knows you're barely breathing. Before you leave, he pulls one last item from a smaller pouch, a beard stencil. Yes, a stencil. Made from pressed papyrus and shaped like a narrow triangle, it's meant to help align beard lines. He shows you how it's placed over the face, secured by pressure on the cheeks, and then carefully trimmed around. You burst out laughing. "Do people actually use that?" K-Pa grins. "Only those who fear judgment." You slip out of the house just as the sun starts its descent, feeling like you've touched a piece of history. You walk back through the streets, noticing now how every polished jaw, every crisp eyebrow line, every shimmer of oil hints at a toolkit behind the scenes. Someone kneeling in the dark with a box of razors and a prayer. And as you pass a young apprentice struggling to fold his master's cloth without creasing the protective symbols, you give him a small nod. A silent, "I see you." Because you do now. Behind every sacred cut is a barber with a box. You wake the next day to a dull ache behind your knees and a strange, ghostly soreness in places you didn't even know had muscles, likely a side effect of crouching too long during yesterday's pumice demonstration. But there's no time to dwell on your budding scoliosis. Because today, you learn what it means to go completely hairless. Not just the scalp, not just the cheeks. We're talking full-body depilation. A practice that, in ancient Egypt, was equal parts hygiene, religion, and, let's be honest, an extreme sport. You arrive at K-Pa's stall just in time to meet a returning client, a broad-shouldered man with a face so smooth it practically reflects sunlight. He's here for the works, and K-Pa simply nods like this is a normal Tuesday. The client disrobes behind a thin linen screen while you prep hot water and uncap several small jars. K-Pa gives you the rundown as you work. "Most men want the full shave for temple ceremonies," he says, rolling out a reed mat. "Priests must be spotless. No body hair, no sweat traps, no distractions. The gods don't like itchy armpits." That last part may not be canonical theology, but it makes sense. Ancient Egyptian priests, especially those serving in the grand temples of Karnak or Luxor, were expected to shave every part of their bodies every other day. Hair was seen as a barrier to purity, messy, unpredictable, prone to lice and odor. Smooth skin, on the other hand, was God-friendly. Holy epidermis. You lay out the tools, a set of finely sharpened bronze razors, a clay bowl of thick waxy resin, and, wait for it, a leech jar. You do a double take. "We're using leeches now?" K-Pa chuckles. "Some clients believe the leeches pull out hair and draw out toxins. Personally, I think they're just dramatic." Historians are still debating the historical accuracy of leech-based depilation. It might have been a fringe practice, or the result of later scribes getting a little too poetic. But in your current reality, it's happening. The client reclines on the mat, arms spread wide like he's auditioning for a fresco. K-Pa starts with the wax. It's warm, thick, and smells vaguely of honey and vengeance. Using a flat bone spatula, he spreads it along the chest, waits a moment, then yanks it off in one brutal swoop. The man doesn't even flinch. "Used to it," he mutters. You try not to cry on his behalf. K-Pa moves methodically, chest, arms, stomach, back, underarms. The client is flipped, stretched, and repositioned with the efficiency of a linen-folding priestess. Every patch of hair is tackled with either wax or razor, depending on texture and mood. And the most astonishing part? This was normal. Upper-class Egyptians, especially priests, temple dancers, and women in high society, underwent regular full-body depilation. Some used pumice stones to scrub away regrowth between waxes. Others applied herbal pastes made from crushed legumes, natron, and sour milk to weaken follicles. One particularly aggressive method involved applying quicklime paste to the skin. You heard about it once from Kepa's uncle, and the look in his eyes said chemical burn, louder than any scroll could. You hold the towel as Kepa moves to the legs, using his obsidian razor for precision. The client mumbles about attending a lunar rite that evening. Must be clean for the moon, he says. You don't question it. You just nod like you, too, have shaved for celestial events. At one point, the man requests a navel blessing. Kepa pauses, dabs a bit of myrrh oil around his belly button, and mutters a short prayer to Hathor. The gods are everywhere, even in the soft folds of your torso. Then comes the final challenge, the legs and feet. Feet were important. Sacred grounds, temple floors, burial rituals, your feet had to be worthy. Many Egyptians oiled and shaved them regularly. Some even painted the soles for festivals. And apparently the presence of toe hair was considered slightly offensive to at least two gods. Though historians still debate whether that's literal or metaphorical. You hand Kepa a clean cloth to wipe the last of the wax away. The man rises, gleaming like a polished alabaster statue. He thanks Kepa, hands over a pouch of dried dates and 2 duck feathers, bonus payment, apparently, and disappears behind the linen screen. You sag onto a stool, exhausted just from watching. Kepa hands you a jar. Go apply this to your arms. You hesitate. What is it? Depilation paste. You'll need the experience. You sniff it, mint, vinegar, ground almonds, and something vaguely metallic. You smear it on, wait 5 minutes, and then scrape it off with a dull blade. The results? Unnervingly effective. Your forearms now resemble that of a newborn deity. You stare at your own skin, stunned. There's something a little surreal about being this smooth. It's not just cosmetic. It feels ceremonial, like your skin's been reset. You imagine stepping into a temple, light bouncing off your limbs like you're a living offering. Kepa laughs at your expression. Told you. The gods prefer it that way. He shows you a small clay tablet, etched with a hymn. Let no hair remain, for the skin is the temple of the soul. That's not just poetry. That's policy. You spend the rest of the day helping clients with their own grooming quests, one man with overzealous shoulder hair, another requesting just the elbows for luck. You assist with oiling, pasting, even gently toweling off a rather shy teenager getting his first full wax. You don't judge. You just hold the bowl, nod solemnly, and whisper encouraging things like, "The gods are watching, and they are impressed." By sunset, you've seen more skin than a linen laundry tent during festival season. And yet you leave feeling cleansed. Smooth, slightly tingly, and definitely closer to understanding what holy hygiene means in this world. As you walk home, you pass a woman with a shaved scalp and gilded eyebrows. She looks radiant, proud, unapologetically bare. She glances at your arms, notes the shimmer, and gives you a nod. It's the nod of someone who knows. You are, for now, spiritually exfoliated. Today, you don't meet Kepa in the plaza, or at his stall, or even near the temple gates. Instead, he finds you, waving from the edge of the Nile like a man with secrets, and a boat. You're coming, he says, already stepping onto a wooden skiff bobbing gently against the shore. It's long, narrow, shaded by a faded canopy, and painted with faint blue stripes. You squint. Is that a stool bolted to the deck? Wait, no. Several stools. Oh no. It's a floating barbershop. You step aboard, and the world shifts, literally. The boat wobbles, water sloshes, and your sandals immediately feel like bad choices. But Kepa is already moving with purpose, rearranging tools, setting down baskets of oils and folded linen, all while the boatman pushes off with a long pole, guiding you out into the current. This is unexpected. Turns out, some barbers took their services to the elite, who preferred to be groomed on the go. The Nile wasn't just a river, it was the kingdom's spine. People worked on it, lived beside it, transported everything from grain to gossip down its length. And for the wealthy? It was also a place to recline luxuriously with a beer while someone removed their armpit hair. You pass papyrus reeds and laundry flapping on the shore. Children wave. A heron struts past like it owns the universe. Kepa sets out his tools. Today's setup is compact but complete: a curved bronze razor, a wide-toothed comb carved from sycamore wood, and a tiny flask of something dark and spicy smelling. Clove oil, he mutters. For the rich ones? You soon find out who he means. The first client arrives by canoe. Literally. A second boat glides up, carrying a man draped in gold-threaded linen and wearing a perfumed cone on his head. He smells like cardamom and cinnamon-drenched ambition. His servant hops out first, checks the deck for slipperiness, and then gestures grandly for the noble to disembark. You try not to stare. The man flops onto the stool with the dramatic air of someone used to being fanned while thinking. Just the brows and neck, he says, waving a ring-covered hand. And oil the feet. You raise your eyebrows. Kepa doesn't even blink. As he begins trimming the man's eyebrows with a delicate ivory blade, the noble begins his monologue. He complains about the rising cost of imported barley, the scandalous state of the priesthood, and most passionately, the fool who tried to imitate his beard pattern at last week's temple feast. Kepa just hums and snips, careful not to laugh as the noble transitions into a tangent about his pet ibis who refuses to bathe. This is more than grooming. This is performance. Therapy. Politics. Historians still argue whether these floating barber boats were common or a luxury for the very elite. But records do describe riverfront grooming, especially during festivals and long voyages. And what you're witnessing now definitely falls under festival-level indulgence. The man requests a hot towel. Kepa gestures to you. You heat a square of damp linen over a small clay brazier set into the boat's side. It's risky, open flame on a boat? But this isn't your first Nile rodeo. You manage it without lighting your tunic on fire. The towel is applied. The noble sighs with such theatrical satisfaction, it almost makes the heron look judgmental. Next, a light massage. You help Kepa mix a quick salve, almond oil, a pinch of cinnamon, and a dash of vinegar. It smells surprisingly good. The noble extends his feet. You resist the urge to ask how one becomes wealthy enough to expect toe oiling mid-river. Don't forget the heel, he mutters. Oh, the gods forbid. Kepa handles the task with professional detachment, then applies a bit of powdered natron to seal the freshness. As he puts it, the noble rises, tips with a slice of honeyed fig, and is whisked away by his waiting canoe. You sit back, dizzy from the scent of 5 competing fragrances and the gentle rock of the river. But there's no time to rest. A woman boards next. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, barefoot. No perfume cone, no gold, just quiet purpose. She wants her arms waxed. You expect drama. She doesn't flinch once. I'm heading to the Temple of Neith, she says, watching the trees pass. She prefers clean hands. It's not a metaphor. She's a weaver priestess, and part of her role involves preparing ritual cloth. Clean limbs are part of the package. And yes, armpit hair counts. Kepa treats her with the same care as the noble. He even adjusts her seating so the sun hits her arms just right for waxing. She murmurs a quiet prayer as he works, something about sacred threads and the weaving of fate. You hand her a damp cloth when it's done. She squeezes your fingers gently. You'll be good at this, she says. You're weirdly moved. As the sun climbs higher, you pass docks, temples, and homes with re-thatched roofs. More clients come and go. A young boy getting his first beard trim. A merchant wife whose husband requested her legs be festival smooth. Even a quiet, cloaked figure who never speaks, just holds out his hand for a palm exfoliation and disappears without paying. Kepa doesn't mind. He brings good luck, he says. You're not sure if that's superstition or credit deferral. At one point, you both lean back and share a quick meal, flatbread, a smear of fig paste, and a few olives. The wind off the water smells like fish and sunlight. Your hands still carry the faint scent of cardamom and sweat. Kepa looks out at the rippling water and says, People change on the river. They tell more truth. You nod. It's true. The floating barbershop is a moving confession booth. A grooming ritual. A stage. And somehow, a sacred space all its own. By sunset, the boat pulls back to shore. The tools are packed away. The deck is cleaned. A faint trail of sandalwood lingers in the air. You step onto land again, legs wobbly, arms sticky with oil, and head spinning with riverborne stories. And as you walk home, you pass a man boasting loudly about his haircut to a group of friends. It was done on the Nile, he says, smug. Nothing touches the skin quite like boat air. You grin. You know better. It wasn't the air. It was the barber. At this point, you think you've seen it all: shaved heads, scented feet, accidental beard tragedies. But today brings something different. Today, you're leaving the market stalls and temple shadows behind, following Kepa as he joins a caravan of soldiers preparing for departure. He's got his kit slung over one shoulder and a face that says don't ask questions until we've reached the edge of the city. You, of course, immediately ask questions. Where are we going? War, Kepa mutters, chewing a piece of dried figure. But first, trims. Yes, barbers had roles on the battlefield. Not for slicing enemies, but for preparing soldiers before they marched off to possibly meet Osiris with honorably smooth cheeks. You arrive at the army camp just past sunrise. It smells like leather, firewood, and unresolved tension. Men stretch, eat their last good meals for a while, and tighten sandals. But in one shaded corner, under a hastily strung tarp, Kepa sets up shop. There's already a line. The first client is a captain with arms like carved stone and a forehead lined with worry. He wants the full scalp shave, clean, sacred, no distractions. He murmurs that he's dreamed of Anubis, and he doesn't want to show up in battle looking spiritually unprepared. Kepa gets to work, using his obsidian razor for the smoothest finish. You hand him the oil, frankincense, and olive today, because this guy's got rank, and you watch as tension seems to lift from the soldier's shoulders with every swipe. It's almost meditative. And you start to get it. War, for these men, isn't just about steel and sand. It's about facing the unknown with a clean spirit. And there's nothing quite as grounding as a sharp blade, a warm cloth, and the steady hand of someone who's shaved both the living and the dead. Historians confirm this. Barbers marched with troops, especially elite divisions. Their tools were as vital as spears. Grooming before battle was both ritual and morale boost. Some texts even mentioned shaving before duels, as if to say, if I'm going to die, I'm dying dignified. A young recruit sits down next. He's shaking slightly. First deployment. He asks Kepa for something brave. Kepa just nods, trims his cheeks to crisp angles, and leaves a thin mustache, barely visible, but somehow confident. It's not about looking older, Kepa says quietly. It's about recognizing your face when it matters. That one sticks with you. Later, a grizzled sergeant stops by for an eyebrow trim, his superstition. Claims he once survived a cavalry charge because he trimmed his brows into a hawk shape that morning. The gods respect detail, he mutters. You don't question him. Then come the injuries. You didn't expect it, but barbers in the field weren't just for grooming, they handled minor wounds too. Kepa opens a side pouch from his kit, revealing cloth strips, dried herbs, and a jar of honey. He treats a cut on a soldier's cheek, applies a crushed coriander poultice to a nasty blister, and cleans another man's infected ear piercing. Happens when the earring's bronze, he explains. You realize quickly, a battlefield barber is part healer, part therapist, part portable priest. His blades slice more than hair, they cut through fear. And somehow, the men talk more here than they did in Memphis. Maybe it's the proximity of danger. Maybe it's the scent of warm oil. But stories flow. One soldier recounts a nightmare of being judged by Osiris with matted hair. Another shares how his late brother always oiled his beard before a fight and made him promise to do the same. You listen. You hold towels. You refill water. You become part of it. Kepa tells you about a time he traveled with a battalion to Nubia. Harsh winds, sand in every crevice, no temple for miles. But even there, men lined up for shaves before skirmishes, whispering prayers as their hair fell. One even requested a sacred braid before his last battle. Wanted the gods to see his devotion in his hair, Kepa says. Historians still debate the specifics of these rituals, how widespread, how standardized, but the presence of razors and grooming tools in military burials suggests the tradition ran deep. Grooming wasn't vanity. It was preparation. It was armor. As the sun dips lower, the soldiers begin final checks. Weapons, water skins, goodbye letters. You help Kepa pack up. He folds each towel like it's sacred linen, wipes each blade as if it's a scroll from the temple. Then, unexpectedly, a soldier approaches with a quiet request. My brother fell yesterday, he says. Can you? Kepa nods. You follow him to a quiet corner, where a wrapped body rests beneath a thin shroud. Kepa kneels, unwraps the face, and begins to shave it. Slowly. Carefully. The final grooming. You hand him the last of the oil. He anoints the forehead, whispers something too soft to catch, and smooths the shroud back into place. The soldier watching wipes his eyes. Thank you, he says. And you understand. This isn't just about appearances. It's about respect. Dignity. Closure. Hair grows wild in chaos. Shaving it is order. And tonight the soldiers will ride out under the stars, faces clean, hearts steadied, carrying the memory of a razor's whisper and a hand that didn't flinch. You leave the camp in silence, the scent of coriander and blood still clinging to your clothes. And for the first time you think, when the gods look down, maybe they judge not just the heart, but the face. The final day begins with a smoky haze over Memphis. Someone's burning myrrh in a market stall, and it wafts through the air like a curtain, catching in your nostrils, curling around your thoughts. You're walking slower today. There's a weight in your limbs, not unpleasant, more like your body's way of acknowledging everything you've learned. And what you're about to witness brings it full circle. Kepa is already there, outside a modest temple complex nestled between two shrines and a date vendor who sings badly but with enthusiasm. There's a linen bundle in his lap, a jar of oil beside him, and a priest waiting with a solemn face. Final cuts today, Kepa says quietly. You sit beside him, and he begins unwrapping the bundle, locks of hair. Some curled, some tightly braided, some gray, some black, some bright and wiry. Each one carefully wrapped in a strip of linen. Each one labeled in black ink with names, dates, prayers. These are offerings, Kepa explains. Given to the gods. Cut during moments of change. The Temple of Hathor accepts them on the new moon. Hair offerings were a tradition that straddled the spiritual and the deeply personal. People offered hair during rites of passage, first haircuts, births, marriages, deaths, vows taken or broken. Locks were stored, blessed, then burned or buried beneath temple stones. A symbolic shedding. A message to the divine. You watch as Kepa gently oils the locks, rubbing them between his palms with reverence. Then the priest steps forward, opening a shallow pit lined with polished stone. One by one, the hair is placed in. Kepa whispers each name as he lays them down. You don't know these people, but somehow, each one feels familiar. A child's first braid. A widow's morning snip. A traveler's scalp lock before leaving for Nubia. A merchant's gray streak, donated before his heart stopped mid-prayer. Historians still argue how widespread the practice was. Some temples encouraged it, others considered it regional. But surviving papyri and temple carvings confirmed the sacredness of hair clippings. They were treated with more dignity than most personal belongings. The last lock is your own. You blink. When did Kepa even? But there it is. A small curl from behind your ear, cut sometime during your training, wrapped in cloth like the others. You feel a strange tightness in your chest. Your journey too, he says. It deserves a mark. The lock is laid gently atop the pile, and the priest sprinkles ground incense. He chants. Softly. Almost lazily. The words drift upward like smoke, weightless and unhurried. Then the flame is touched to the pile, and it flares for a moment, bright, brief, sacred. You sit in silence for a long time. Later, you help Kapa clean his tools for what feels like the 100th time, but today, there's no rush. Every stroke of the cloth, every gentle scraping of oil from bronze, feels like a farewell. Even the apprentice works more slowly, humming a lullaby under his breath. The last client of the day is an old woman. Wrinkled, quiet, half-blind. She doesn't want a shave or a trim, just a scalp massage. Kapa obliges, working oil into her skin with the delicacy of someone tuning an instrument made of sand. When she's done, she simply touches Kapa's hand, nods to you, and walks away into the fading gold of evening. You pack the box together. Fold the cloth. Rinse the basin. Kapa looks at you finally and says, "You'll do well." You open your mouth to say something, anything, but words are like sand in the wind today. Instead, you press your hand to your own bare head. It's warm. Familiar. Home. As you leave the stall for the last time, the streets of Memphis feel slower, softer. Everyone is bald. Everyone is beautiful. And somehow, everyone looks freshly blessed. You pass the river, where the barber boat rocks gently against the shore. You pass the funeral house, where a young man kneels before a basin, razor in hand. You pass the temple, where an offering of hair smolders into the sky. And as night falls across the land of the pharaohs, you realize you'll never see a simple shave the same way again. It's not just hair. It's memory. Ritual. Renewal. It's letting go, so something else can grow. The streets of Memphis quiet down as the last glow of day slips behind the temple walls. The chatter fades, sandals scuff softer against dust, and even the breeze seems to hush, moving slower through the palms and across the water. You find yourself sitting beside a brazier still warm from the last shave, watching the embers glow dimly, their light flickering across the curve of a bronze blade packed away for the night. Kapa's gone now. So are the clients. The tools are silent in their box. The oils are capped. The cloths are folded, corners aligned like a ritual in itself. The whole world seems to exhale, and you exhale with it. You close your eyes, and behind your lids you still see it all, the slow glide of razors across skin, the shimmer of temple lights reflecting on bald heads, the gentle murmur of prayers whispered through rooms scented with sandalwood and story. The city sleeps. The gods, you imagine, recline somewhere above, pleased with their clean, smooth devotees. Even the lice, for once, seem to have called it a night. Your limbs are heavy. Your breath is slower. Each inhale tastes like oil and old dust, and something sweet, maybe fig, maybe sleep. And if you dream tonight, maybe it will be of the Nile. Maybe you'll find yourself on a floating barber boat, the river rocking gently beneath you, as someone trims away not just hair, but everything heavy that clings too long. Let it all fall. Let yourself be made clean again. Let yourself rest.